Now, let's say you look at this and you say, this is almost completely perfect, only I feel it's slightly too red. I feel it's just a little bit too red. Now, the way to adjust that is to go to this drop down right here, and you can affect how red it is, how green it is, and how blue it is. So I'm going to go to red, and see this little point in the center right there? Of course you do. You're looking at it. If I were to drag it down just a little bit, so you move these up and down, you don't move them left and right, never do that. You move these up and down. If I move this down just a little bit, I can make it a little bit less red, or I can move it down a lot and make it a lot less red. So let me undo that. And in fact, let me go into each of these and just kind of play with it a little bit. Make it a little bit less green, a little bit more green. Go in here, make it a little bit more yellow, a little bit more blue. All right, there we go. Now, something to note about these three drop downs, and then we'll go back to fixing other pictures and we'll make it good. And you'll be like, yay, color correcting, how much fun I'm having. I assume that's how you talk. Something you should note is if you make something more red, you're actually making it less cyan. So let me undo that. So in other words, if I drag it this way, I'm actually making it more cyan. If you make something more green, you are actually making it less purple. And if you make something less green, you are making it more purple. And as one last thing, if you make something more blue, you are actually making it less yellow. What in the world are you talking about, Jeremy, is probably what you're asking yourself right now. So let's go back to our handy-dandy color chart. File, open recent. One nifty thing about the color wheel right here is you can see this taking place. If you make something less red, it becomes more green. If you make something less purple, it becomes more yellow. Less orange, it becomes more cyan. You can see it happening right there. Or actually, let me show you an example that you can actually pull up right here. So I'm going to go into color balance. Here we go. And you can see the chart right here. In order to make it less red, you need to make it more cyan. In order to make it less green, you need to make it more purple. Now, why is this? Can't you just take out the red is probably what you're asking. But if I were to just take out the red, here's what would happen. So let me actually go into something that I haven't shown you yet. And I'll show you this a little bit better later when it's a little bit more relevant. So don't worry about how I'm doing this. But if I were to just take out the red, this is what would happen. The red parts of this would just become far more blander, or they would become less saturated. Or another way to phrase that is their chroma would decrease. But that's a confusing way to phrase that. So it's the difference between taking the red in an image and decreasing its chroma, and taking the red in an image, here, let me go back here, taking a red in an image, and if I go back to color balance, and shifting its hue. This has all gotten a bit more confusing than I care to admit. So let's open up the color thing one more time. When you're shifting around color, you can shift it so the red goes from a very high chroma to a very low chroma, so it gets more saturated or less saturated, or you can put in red's place its complementary color. And if you put the complementary color, and let me actually be a little bit more specific here. If you put the complementary hue in the place of where that red is, it makes it less red. It shifts the hue to blue. I hope this is making some semblance of sense right here. Let me actually show you exactly what I mean. Let's say you had a black and white image. Here we go. It's a black and white image. Why not? If you wanted to make this image more white, you would have to make it less black. If you want to make an image less black, you need to make it more white. I think I just said that the opposite. If you want to make it more black, you need to make it less white. Color works in exactly the same way. If you want to make an image more red, you need to make it less cyan. If you want to make an image more cyan, you need to make it less red. And you can do that directly inside of the curves palette by moving this middle point up and down. So red actually controls red and cyan. Green actually controls green and purple. And blue actually controls blue and yellow. If you move it up, it becomes more. If you move it down, it becomes more of the complementary color. Now, how do you remember those? There's an easy way. Red, green, blue is one of them. And then have you ever heard the phrase CMYK? It's what printers use. Cyan, magenta, yellow. They match up. Red is to cyan, green is to magenta, blue is to yellow. That might help some of you. That might help none of you. I'm happy I said it, and I'm not taking it back. So in other words, the ways that I fix just about any image is I create a curves color adjustment layer. Let's do that right here. I hit auto. I say, oh no, that's not the auto I want. That's gross. I go to auto options, go enhance per channel contrast. And if that's good enough, I say, okay, that was good enough. If that's not good enough, so let's go to something like this. I go to curves. I hit auto. I say icky gross from the default options. I go to enhance per channel contrast. I say that is not good enough. So I set a white point, way too white, and I use Alt to make me figure out where the white point I want is. Not white enough. Not white enough. Never mind. That looks pretty good right there. I set a black point, so maybe this. That looks like it's a little extreme, but it looks pretty good to me. And let's set a midpoint of this right here. I don't like how that looks, so where would something else be? Maybe this? Definitely not that. I'll kind of guess a little with these. And, you know, it's a little bit of playing around. There is an art to it. It's not all math. I think the microphone right here looks pretty neutral. And while this is actually pretty neutral right here, I kind of like the stylized colors that were happening. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to get this neutral right here. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to play around with it a little bit. And even though it's just 3 clicks, it's the right 3 clicks. And I tend to go a little bit too extreme. So maybe I'll increase the lights, decrease the darks, and then just bring down the opacity on that layer right there. And just in that, it went from this to this. Let me show you that again because that was a whole lot of different steps. Don't save. Strawberry blue channel. All right, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to click on curves. If I press auto, I don't necessarily like what I get, so I'm going to switch the auto options and I'm going to go to enhance per channel contrast. This is much better. So let me again just show you the difference. This is using it with the default auto setting. This is with the far better auto setting. And right now we have the difference between this. And that's just in using the auto. If I want to make it lighter, I do this. If I want to make it darker, I do this. So something you'll notice is when I'm just on RGB, this makes it lighter, this makes it darker. But when I'm on the individual color settings, it actually shifts the hues themselves. Don't worry about why this is happening. Just be aware that this makes it lighter and darker. So this will make it lighter. And these individual drop downs will either make it more red to more cyan or any of the other things that I've listed in the past. So let's get rid of this right here. Don't save it and go right here. I'm going to go to here, curves, curves, auto. Auto doesn't make me all that happy, so I'm going to try the other version of auto. You'll notice there's 4 versions of auto. I really only like to play with this one, enhance per channel contrast. And sometimes I'll set the clip up a little bit more. And already that's all right, but I'm going to actually set a white point. That's way too white, so I'm going to go down here, hit Alt. Let's see what happens when I go right there. I'm going to set a dark point. So that looks pretty good right there. And I'm going to set a midpoint. What looks like a neutral gray to me? Maybe this? I don't think that did anything. I'm just going to click randomly in this image and see what happens. And we see different results happening. I'm pretty happy with this. It made it go from this to this. Now I could push this even further, and that's exactly what I've done in the past, but we're just going to make it go from that to that just in 3 clicks. Now you're probably saying to me, all right, Jeremy, I get this, I'm clicking the white, I'm clicking the black, and everything's becoming slightly better, but I still don't quite understand what's going on in the curves panel. So let's go to curves, and I'm going to try hitting auto. I'm going to go here, I'm going to go to auto options, and what I say to that is, honestly, for now, don't worry about it. You're just getting started in Photoshop. Just be aware that this is the best way to do it, and this is the panel that gives you these 3 eyedroppers right here. Now, if you finish using these 3 eyedroppers and you're not completely happy with it, so let me actually affect what I think the midpoint is. There we go. That's much better right there. If you're not happy with it And if curves is seeming a little bit too confusing for you, and you know what, it is the most advanced tool you'll find in color correction in Photoshop. If it's seeming a little bit too confusing to you, what you can always do is, instead of going into the individual channels, red, green, and blue, is you can always use color correction layers, color adjustment layers together. So I could then add a color balance to on top of this and make it so all of this is more red on top of this. You can always stack them on top of each other. That is an option. I just wanted to show you the very best tools. So from the very start, you're doing it the right way, because as you can see, curves doesn't have to be considered all that confusing of a tool. I'm hitting Alt right here. That looks pretty good. Let's find the black point. That seems a little bit too dark, so let's set it to that. That seems much, much better. And I'm going to just set the midpoint as, let's say it's this. You know what? That probably is a lot more color accurate. Oh, by the way, the last underscore in the name is where I've been getting the pictures from. This is their, they set it in the Creative Commons, and this is their handle on Flickr. So please do go to their channels. I very much appreciate their contributions. So one last one. And then what I'm going to do in the next video is show how you can do something such as change the color of a t-shirt inside of an image. So I'm just going to go to Auto. I'm going to set the white point. I'm going to set the black point. You know what? Those all look good. Let's just set a neutral gray point. There we go. A single click. Get it going from that to that. I'm pretty happy with that. All right. In the next video, I'll show you how to change the color of a person's t-shirt inside of an image.